All right. Hello, everyone. Recently, I found this really cool video on Twitter. And here's the original creator. And I thought I would make some sounds for it. And, well, this is how it turned out. And it turned into a pretty cool exercise in terms of creating a balance between noisy and tonal elements and figuring out how to make your mix clean and punchy. I'll just go into some of the approaches I took. There will be a little bit of processing here as well. So let's get started. I started off with figuring out what's the pace, what's the kind of a cadence, what's the story of the scene, and just looked at it a couple of times, figuring out what I need to do. And as we can see, there's a lot of very cool stylistic sword swings that look quite powerful. And then it transitions into this big lion blast, kind of a magical power-up, I would say, that fills up our entire screen and then it dies off. And I thought that I'll just start with figuring out sounds for the sword whooshes and try to think about what's the most important thing to be hearing from the player's perspective. So we need to make it cool. We need to make it interesting, but we also need to figure out what kind of information we are giving to the player. So the actual sword swing, without the hit, is an interaction with some sort of input from the player, probably, if this was like a finished game. So we need to tell the player, okay, you did something, and the game is reacting to it. But then we also need to give the player information that the hit has registered. You can see that the enemy is highlighting when this is happening, and we will try to convey this through sound as well. And we need to think in terms of the priority. So for me, it's very important in that the player knows that the hit has connected and that they dealt damage. So we will set up our sidechaining structure in a way that prioritizes this sort of information. But just to start off, I'll just show some of the main layers soloed and how they interact with each other. So I started off with the sword swings, and there were some tonal elements with some run-of-the-mill just sword swings without any magic. And it's cool, but it doesn't really have that character yet, so I added quite a few fiery layers. And it has a little bit more character. You can hear that it's quite boomy, and there's a lot of noisy elements. I felt that practicing this sort of stuff on fire would be interesting, because fire is quite diverse, but usually is quite broad in terms of frequency spectrum. It fills up your space with a lot of like hissing noises, and there's a lot of like boomy stuff in there as well. So we'll need to figure out how to work with this when we add the hit registry sounds as well. But yeah, this is how the base sword swing sounds. And then I added a couple of like gore/hit marker sounds. And for me, what was important here is that the player is able to do a lot of consecutive swings, which means that the sound should be quite quick. And I also wanted it to be quite gritty and quite impactful. And so I added a couple samples to make that. And now if we would listen to this with the wishes that I made earlier, there wouldn't be too much space. We would get distortion. There would be too much going on at the same time. Just disable this. So you can hear them, but there's a lot of boominess. It doesn't sound clean. So let's just take a quick look at the effect chain I have here, and the main purpose of this effect chain is to make it a little bit more interesting, but mostly just to create space for the gore, for the hit markers. So what we have here is some de-reverb to make it a little bit more tight. Then we have sidechain compression. I'm compressing the lower part of the spectrum a little bit more because I feel that if we want there to be a lot of character, all of the character I think is in the mid section of the frequency spectrum. So we're going to leave it not as attenuated, but we will take the signal from the gore sounds and then drive the sidechain of the compression through this. But also this plugin is a godsend. It's called Track Spacer. It takes the frequency spectrum of the sidechain and applies it to the signal that you have on your bus on your track, which essentially means that you're only attenuating what you want to attenuate, which is an absolute godsend, as I said. Then we're just cleaning up a little bit with some denoise, and All Pass Phase is a really interesting plugin. It's essentially an all-pass filter, which means that it doesn't change the gain relations between frequencies, but it does change the phase relationships between different frequencies, which usually means that it adds some interesting tonality to the sound. And let's just solo it without any gore for now, and this is how it sounds like. And as you're probably thinking right now, it doesn't sound that great. The thing is, though, that we're listening to this in isolation, and what I found that worked for me is that I try to listen in isolation to layers only if I'm making some surgical adjustments. The thing is, though, that with this sidechain, we are leaving quite a lot of space for the gore, for the hit marker sounds, which means that they will work better together. And now we should listen to them in context with the gore sounds turned on. The thing that I felt was a little bit more problematic here is that I still didn't feel that the sword whooshes had enough character to them. So I experimented with some morphing. It didn't work very well, but I found some cool, quite tonal, fiery sounds, and I added them on top of it. They sound like this isolated. And I think adding tonality and just being able to comfortably experiment with tonality is a good way of adding character to your sounds. And together they create a pretty decent sword fight sequence, in my opinion.